Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Assistant Minister for Social Services, Senator Fifield. Can the minister provide the Senate with any information on the impact of the recent Victorian bushfires on older people living in aged care facilities in affected areas?
The Assistant Minister for Social Services, Senator Fifield.
Thank you, Mr President. Bushfires, as we know, are an unfortunate fact of life in Australia, and particularly at the moment in Victoria. And while it's crucially important that all Victorians are prepared, older Australians in aged care facilities are particularly vulnerable at these times. And the safety and well-being of aged care recipients is of paramount importance. I'm sure we all agree that we want to ensure that older Australians stay safe until danger has passed. I'm pleased, Mr President, to inform the Senate that no aged care facilities in Victoria are currently under threat, as the fire situation has eased in Victoria, thanks in part to the efforts of firefighters and emergency services personnel who, as we know, have worked around the clock. However, over recent days, 2 aged care facilities were evacuated in Victoria. The first facility, the Onluk Chinese Nursing Home in Donvale, was evacuated on Saturday. 20 residents were relocated to be with their families until the threat had passed. All residents have now been returned safely to the facility. In the second facility, Wattle Glen Aged Care in Wattle Glen, 7 residents left the facility early on Sunday to stay with family. All residents have since returned safely since the danger has passed. I can advise my South Australian colleagues that 12 inpatients and residents of the Laura Campus Multipurpose Service were relocated yesterday due to a fire threat near the town of Laura. Those residents and patients have been relocated to Port Pirie and Crystal Brook and will be returned when the threat passes.
Senator McKenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I have a supplementary. Can the minister inform the Senate what assistance the government can provide to affected residents and facilities in emergency situations?
The order. The Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. While the primary responsibility for responding to emergency events lies with state and local governments, the federal government does work very closely with state and territory health and emergency services management agencies to support service providers during emergency events like bushfires. Specifically, the Department of Social Services, if required, will consult local and state providers to identify suitable alternative places for residents in other facilities outside the area of threat, and will also monitor the temporary care arrangements made for residents during and after a bushfire. The safety of older Australians is of paramount importance at these times, and it is a legislative requirement for approved providers to have emergency risk management plans and protocols in place to protect their residents during emergencies such as bushfires, and the Aged Care Quality Agency also has a monitoring role.
Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister specifically advise the Senate how the Commonwealth Government has been working with the Victorian State Government to provide assistance to those Victorians affected by these bushfires?
The Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. In emergencies such as bushfires, obviously federal and Victorian agencies liaise closely together, ensure that communication is maintained, that there is collaboration to ensure that any residents who need to be relocated are found temporary accommodation until danger passes. In fact, it is not uncommon for Department of Social Services staff, when it's required, are actually embedded at emergency headquarters hubs to make sure that there is seamless communication between Commonwealth and state authorities. Mr President, sometimes residents, and this is by far the preferable outcome where it's appropriate, will stay with their family for the duration. On other occasions, it's necessary to find another aged care facility. But regardless, it's important that all 3 arms of government work together to ensure that this vulnerable group are protected at times of danger.
Time's expired, Senator Abetz.
I ask that further questions be